So we're at Hall Street on the near west side in Akron.
Okay, we're on Hall Street. This is where I grew up. And we're just past the Quigley house. Bill Quigley was a funeral director at Dunn Quigley Funeral Home.
These old big houses. When were these built? Around 1910, 1920?
Probably a little before then. I know my dad bought Hall Street in the Depression in the 1930s. And there had been somebody that lived there before us who was actually a St. Vincent nun, Sister Dismas. Her family lived there. Their name was Whack.
And your mom got money from her sisters
Yes.
to help buy the house. I remember that story.
Yes, Grace and Betty.
And they said, okay, yeah, we'll loan you the money, but it's got to go in her name.
Yeah. Now this house here, 100, that was a Schumey house.
Okay.
Esther Schumey was my first job, was putting storm windows up and down in that house and mowing her lawn with the little reel mower. Esther was very nice to us. She'd bring over Christmas cookies, and they were really good cookies.
So it was like an older lady?
Yeah.
Kind of like Miss Margie was when we were kids?
Yes, and she worked at General, and her father was still alive, and her sister would come over sometimes. I'm trying to remember the sister's name. But Esther lived there, and then after her father passed, she still lived there. And this is our house, 104 Hall. It's a little different now. They have siding and
they had that addition back then and all that?
Roof. Yeah, there's a back porch back there. Yeah.
And it goes in the attic. Is that where Aunt Mary was, in the attic?
Yeah. This room in the front of the attic was where Diana had a room. And then
okay.
Mary and Diana and Maggie and Annie were all up there. And Judy and the others at different times. Eventually, my bedroom was right on the right up there. Right up on the right.
Okay.
And my parents' bedroom was the one on the left in the front. And then in the back, Pat had a bedroom, and there's another bedroom back there that I think was Maggie or Annie.
A little crawl space underneath. Did you have a little old school basement?
There's a basement down there, yeah, but it's back beyond that. That's just a crawl space there. And,
do you hang out on this porch at all?
Oh,
you and your little buddies?
Oh, yeah. In the steps there, my brother worked for Loomis, which was a concrete company, and they had some leftover concrete, and they came over and poured those steps. He got it with concrete that was gonna, harden, so they had to use it up, so they put those steps in there. And that's it.
I don't see very many, there's nothing new. These are older houses. There's nothing been redone. What was on this corner here when you were
Those
younger?
were all homes there. Now
Okay.
this house over here, this bluish gray one,
Yeah.
that's the one where my grandparents lived.
The one on the corner there, the blue one?
The blue one, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
My
that's your mom's parents lived there.
Mom and dad lived there. Aunt Betty and Grace were living with them too. And where this area is here, that's fenced in, it's all part of Salvation Army now, there were houses there. There's actually a house right next door to the blue one that was a twinplex where the Eads and the Bob Collins family lived.
Now, where did Aunt Jane and all them live?
That's
Around
the
the
Caruso
corner?
house right here, 108. They live next door to us.
Okay, should we go down the road a little bit?
Jane's is the next one.
All right, let's go down here and check out.
With all the crazy plants.
You said this is the Caruso house?
Yes. Yeah.
Look at all, that's great. Plants and big pillars.
Yeah. They had 2 elderly aunts that lived with them, Betty and Nina. And then they had Nick and Madeline and Mary Ann.
Look at this garden space.
This was a house here.
It's
There was a 2-apartment house that was here for a while. And then that one there is Jane's old house.
And she had was it one sister or 2 sisters?
2 sisters and a brother, Buddy, Joan, and Jill. And they lived there. And Jane's mom was a widow.
Yeah, you said they were kind of lookers, those girls. They had guys around all the time?
All the time. All
Yeah.
the time. And Joan actually married a guy who lived over across the street where their house isn't there anymore. Dave Bulak.
Okay. All right. And then I see there's a cemetery up the road here.
Yeah, that's the cemetery where my grandfather was a caretaker. My mom's dad.
That's at Glenwood Cemetery?
Glendale.
Glendale.
Yep.
Oh, I should know that.
He was, then up here, this corner house is a Robinson house.
Let's check that out.
Barb was friends with Annie, and Bob was friends with Pat. And they went to Central. Their dad was a fireman. But this next house across the way, that's the Williams house. This it's a different color now. It used to be white, but the Williamses, Brian Williams, became he was the superintendent of Akron Public Schools for several years, and Ray was a year ahead of me.
That's that gray house right there?
This
Or
kind
this
of
beige
brownish beige
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Clover
That was where the
Dale.
Williamses lived.
That's a nice little quiet neighborhood right now.
Yeah, it sure is. It's quiet. And further up the street up there is where the Paul Wilson family lived.
And that was the Wilson Plumbers. That was my the guy who officiated my wedding. R.C. Wilson is a cousin of theirs.
He's a cousin. There was two Wilson families in the St. Vincent Parish. There was Ralph Wilson, who was Paul's dad. And they lived up on Crown, 345 Crown. And the other Wilson, John Wilson and Rob and Dr. Carolyn Wilson, they lived over in Highland Square area. And Paul and I were real good friends. We were in the classmates for 12 years on the track team together and all that. He set the record in the pole vault in 1967, and a guy broke it like 2 years ago. So he had the record for over 50 years for pole vault.
Well, you mentioned the mile record. You had that for a long time, and the guy who broke it, if I recall, ended up living right there on Oakwood.
Yes.
That kid lived in the Lovett's house when
Yeah.
they sold it.
Matt Busick, yeah.
So, all right, let's take a walk back that other way.
That porch roof, I put the porch roof on there one time when Dad and Mom were still living here. I tore the old one off and put a new one on by myself.
Then when they left, or at some point it was Carol's house. She was living here with her brood.
8 kids. When she got divorced, they ended up moving in with Mom and Dad and living here. And I was still at home. And I think Annie was still at home. And later we moved. Annie got married, and we moved to a trailer that my dad found in Canton Road.
Yeah, on that
Carol
91
lived here with her family for quite a while.
White Horse or whatever it's called.
White House trailer park. Yeah, yeah. But I put the roof on that porch, and I finally figured out what I was doing in about the last 10 minutes of the job.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
There was a lot of cutting. There's 2 different places where it peaks, and it was like you put down 2 or 3 straight pieces, and then you had to cut one. So it was pretty challenging. This is the Balch Street Community Center. Back in early days, it was the Akron Jewish Center. And our family swam here and played basketball and paddleball and all kinds of things to keep us out of the streets. We had a family membership, and we used it, everybody, especially the younger ones. Pat was a lifeguard here, and he worked in the health club. It was his first job. Diana was a lifeguard here. Ann and Maggie and I and Pat all learned to swim here, and we were taught by a guy named Kenny Graham, who was Pat's first coach. And Pat took to swimming better than anyone else. He became an All-American at the University of Akron, Uh, his sister Ann, my sister Ann, and I just took us a few years to catch up. We're, you know, national contenders now in our late 70s. Okay, so we got our first taste of swimming here, and it was great. It was great. We had a lot of fun. The pool's very small. It's 20 yards, 4 lanes, but it was enough for us to learn how to swim, and for my sister Ann and Diana in particular to get their start on life saving, and took all the life saving, all the Red Cross stuff, all the way up through a water safety instructor, and actually ran her own swimming school for several years out in Hudson. So this was a good place for our family, and we were treated well, even though we were Catholics, Irish Catholics. But the Jewish people and the administrators treated us well here. The story was that my brother Chuck, who was actually a Golden Gloves champion in Akron, hell of a fighter, defended a Jewish boy who was getting picked on by people, by other kids, and he defended this kid and you know, staved off the assailants. And after that, somehow his parents got wind of who it was and that, and suddenly we were invited to join the Jewish side. So it was great. Right. Yeah, Chuck was a rough customer as a teenager. He boxed in the Golden Gloves, and he was a city champion. And he was big enough to play football. He played fullback for St. Mary's, but he was still small by today's standards. You know, he probably weighed maybe 175 pounds at tops in high school. Probably not even that much. But he was a rough customer, and he did become an Akron policeman. He was an Akron policeman for a while. Early on. So,
and how many of the McDonalds would have learned to swim here then after that?
Well, probably at least 6 of us. I know Diana was a water safety instructor, and she went pretty far along with her swimming, and Pat and Ann and Maggie and me.
And Ann taught diving as well for a while.
Ann had her own swimming school, and that where she taught people from 3 years old to 60 years old, from infants to mature triathletes swimming. And she also coached diving at Stowe and Western Reserve Academy. She was a diving coach.
And her son Dan coached swimming.
Coached at Cuyahoga Falls High School.
I think,
he was the head coach at Cuyahoga Falls, and he also worked with Hudson Heat, which was a youth team. And the Seed girls, who were grandchildren of my sister Diana, they were star swimmers at Hudson.
And of course, Stephen McDonald got a scholarship for swimming at Arizona State. Stephen was
14 times All-American in high school. They have pictures up of the All-American guys at Firestone. And Steve won so many times, they had to put 2 pictures of him up. One picture of him and some of the All-Americans, and then another picture of just the other All-American accomplishments he had. So some of that all goes back to this place, you know, which is it's strange, but
and the story of looking after somebody who was not able to defend themselves.
Yeah, that's it's a good story. But that's it.
Did you make friends with people in the Jewish community through association?
Some,
here?
Not too many. And I played basketball in their leagues for several years, and I know there was 3 Jewish brothers, the Lazarus brothers, that played. There was Jerry and Billy and Henry, and later they were all caddies at Portage Country Club, where I was a caddy as well. So I knew them from playing basketball here, and then in my late years in high school and post-high school, I knew them again when we caddied together at Portage Country Club. Okay, this is the Marshall House, 131 Oakdale. My best friend Larry lived here with his 9 sisters and brothers and his parents. His father owned a bar called the Village. When we were teenagers, Larry used to work there. He had to go in and clean up and I would help him, and we would take the bottles, the beer bottles, that were put in a trash can by the bartenders, and we would take them out of the trash can and put them into empty cases where they would return the bottles for deposit. So that was his job, like after school, almost every day. And sometimes his brother Bob or Charlie or one of his other brothers might do the same job. But basically, he was responsible for getting the used beer bottles into cases so they could return for deposits. I used to just walk in the house here, you know, we just walk in. And Larry did the same at our house. Times were different then. You know, you didn't lock your doors or anything. And the house was real big, it had a huge attic. And when we were kids, Larry used to go out to this guy, Louis Van Kemper. He lived down the street here somewhere, and he had a farm that somehow was in his family and was out towards Richfield somewhere. So we would go out to the farm once in a while, and Larry would capture snakes and turtles and stuff like that and bring them home. And then he'd hide them up in his attic. So, you know, they'd be in the carpet or behind an old bed or whatever, and he would keep those animals. So,
Yeah.
but, Larry and I spent a lot of time together. We used to go to the Jewish Center, which is a couple blocks away from here, and go swimming and play paddleball and basketball and stuff like that. Okay, I remember when we were about 6 years old, Larry convinced me to run away with him. And Larry had a kind of a wanderlust about him when he was a little kid. And he'd just go places. And finally his mom had to put a sign on him. She hung a sign around his neck and it said, "My name is Larry, I like to roam. Call GE5 6956 and we'll bring him home."
And that was his number?
Yes.
I love that you still remember his number. That's funny how phone numbers kind of came out. And nobody has any phone numbers they remember, but we remember the ones from when we were a kid.
Well, and especially they had different exchanges then. JE stood for Jefferson. And our number was Franklin 60342, FR 60342. I remember that.
Did you ever have the party lines? I know that came a little bit earlier, but
No,
is that
we
something?
didn't have those.
No, that was a little earlier.
But some people I knew had them, and you pick up the phone and sometimes there was somebody else on it. Wasn't even in your family.
Well, since we're here on the corner and everything, and you're talking about this time in your life, you did mention in your writing that part of your relationship with Larry suffered then when he went through divorce, and you know he started living with his boyfriend, and you didn't really know how to take that at the time. And I just wonder if you could reflect on some of how that sat with you then all these years. Because I remember him as being always a positive guy, and I loved hanging out with his boys, and it was like all of a sudden we just didn't.
Well, yeah, that was probably a mistake on my part in a way. I wasn't very tolerant and I didn't understand, and I think that was wrong.
Was that?
Larry, he married a woman and had 2 kids.
Right.
Lived a heterosexual lifestyle for most of his life. And I was in his wedding, he was in my wedding.
So when he made that lifestyle switch and decided, you know, I can't live like this anymore, and they had the divorce, and that was a pretty big surprise then.
Yeah, I think it was. It was to me. And it was kind of a situation that I was kind of intolerant to and uncomfortable with, mainly. And I just, at the time, I felt it was best to keep you kids away from that situation, whatever I deemed it to be. I don't think, looking back, I think that was a bad decision, but at the time, I just didn't really know what to do. And we remained friends, but we weren't tight like we were before.
I just kind of find it interesting that, you know, America has obviously opened up since then in so many different ways, and my own child is part of the LGBTQ community, as is my sister, and the fact that things have opened up, and I think you're speaking to the comfort level. No one's comfortable with what they don't know and they don't understand, and I think we really have to tip our hat to some of these early pioneers. I'm sure for him, especially as a teacher, a male teacher, and then principal of an elementary school, that he had to kind of, or he must have felt that he had to live that closeted life.
He definitely did.
At the time.
I mean, it was like he probably would have lost his job if it would have got out, you know, and it wouldn't have been right, but that's probably what would have happened. And there was a lot of fear and hate and things in the country at that time, and even locally, that, you know, now you wonder why, but that's just the way it was.